And good day and welcome to the CNBC Conversation with myself, Tanya Habimana. Trade between Africa and Dubai has increased substantially over the past few years, with more African companies entering the Emirate states, while the Dubai market simultaneously expands their presence in Africa. The UAE has invested $1.2 billion in sub-Saharan Africa over the past 5 years, and that's according to a white paper issued by the Economist Intelligence Unit. Zen Dlamini, Executive Head, Sovereign and Public Sector Corporate and Investment Banking at Standard Bank, joins me now to expand on this topic. Zen, thank you so much for joining me. Now, you've got an interesting job title, Corporate and Investment Banking, but within the public sector. So what is your mandate? What are you taking care of?
Thank you and good afternoon. Thank you, Tanya. Thanks for having me here. It's an absolute pleasure for me to have an opportunity to come and sit here and chat to you, CNBC Africa. So it's not quite different to what you'd find in other organizations like our competitors. So public sector, sovereign and public sector, we deem that as a node of industries because of all the sectors that the public sector actually dominates. If you think about Transnet, for instance, it's really logistics, it's ports, it's rail, it's roads, and they're also an OEM through their rail engineering. If you think about Sunrail, you know, the impact of Sunrail, if these roads are not fixed, and the highways, if you think about your water boards, for instance, you know, they span across various industries as well, impacting agriculture. And we also talk about ourselves as people that drive like energy security, food security, and infrastructure, amongst others, you know. And as public sector, you are responsible for looking after these clients. You look at SOCs, you think about like the three spheres of government. You've got your provincial, you've got your national, and then you've got like your local government. You also have the SOCs. So every bank would have a relationship with the sovereign and public sector, or government rather. And what we do is how you segment. So you've got your niche clients, you know, that are quite complex, that would sit within the corporate investment banking space. These are the clients that I look after from the Standard Bank perspective. And then you've got clients that are quite smaller, that would be sitting within the BCC space, that is business and corporate commercial clients. But we work across, and it's a good value chain that we support. So we look at clients, it's not just about funding, but it's also about creating value, trying to understand the needs and objectives of the clients. And on behalf of clients, you know, you come inside and then you look at various areas or product areas that are able to provide the kind of needs and the products that the clients are looking for, and then you solution on behalf of the clients. So that's really my role and my team. But I also liaise with my partners from the PCC space. But obviously our area is quite substantial and it's big because we're driving Africa's growth.
I love that, and I'm glad I asked, because this basically means that you're a wealth of knowledge that I'm going to be able to tap into over the next couple of minutes. Now, I understand that Standard Bank has had a presence in the UAE, in Dubai, to be exact, for more, or 25 years quite exactly, since 1997. Now, I'm quite interested to find out a little bit more about what was the strategic drive behind the decision to go into the UAE market, and especially at that time, because you were quite ahead of the curve.
Yes, and look, I'm totally excited to talk about Standard Bank in this day, purely because we've just celebrated, or we are celebrating 160 years of existence as the Standard Bank Group itself. And yes, you are correct. We've had presence in the UAE, or Dubai rather, for 25 years, and specifically the Dubai International Financial Center for 15 years, you know. And maybe if I can also add, what is important is to put forward that our corporate and investment banking division, or arm of the SPG, is the largest CIB bank in the sub-Saharan Africa. We operate across 21 regions in the continent, and we also have financial centers, you know, like in Beijing, Sao Paulo, London, New York, and yes, the much topical Dubai itself. So yes, I mean, back then Standard Bank had a different strategy, and we had presence even in the Russia regions. We had presence in the Europe, and we had presence up just cut across. And the decision was taken later to say that we are going to focus on Africa, and we call ourselves an African bank, and we drive Africa's growth. So tapping into Dubai at the time was when we're looking at various markets, not necessarily just in the continent, but we're looking at markets outside of the continent itself and trying to play a role and make a difference. But obviously we're thinking about bringing your global multinationals into Africa and creating solutions for these other corporates that are looking and are interested in investing in Africa. Well positioned to be doing that because of our points of presence in the continent, and then looking at how we can solution for them outside of the continent itself.
So that really speaks to, in a sense, a dual mandate. On the one hand, to help African companies enter into the UAE region and vice versa. Now, what has been the trends over the latest years in terms of flows? Which direction has been winning?
You know, I think Africa has become like a hub itself, or like an area of focus, and we're lucky that we actually have that kind of presence in Dubai, or the UAE rather, because it has given us an opportunity to like take advantage of businesses in North Africa where we do not have presence out of our points of presence, but we are able to tackle business in North Africa via the Dubai office itself, as well as the Middle East, if you think about it. And we are strategically positioned, and we've seen a lot of companies coming into Africa. But just to address your point, there is quite a huge interest, from the UAE in Africa. It's almost like there is that kind of hunger. As recent as June in this year, in 2022, we hosted a conference in Dubai where we were showcasing SA Inc. Not necessarily just Africa, but we're showcasing SA Inc. because it's the second largest in the continent itself. So we took the SOCs, and we also reached out to our Sovereign Wealth Fund, PIC itself, and we met with your Sovereign Wealth Funds in the UAE, like in Dubai particularly. We had some of the investors and some other corporates that are operating in the UAE. The massive interest, like with this pool of funds. And the conference itself, for the summit, was titled Investment and Collaboration, across various sectors like water, energy, agriculture, just to name a few. And then you also had like quite a number of SOCs that joined us there, including AXA, including like your National Treasury as well, actually joined us there. But the kind of interest that we saw there and the number of meetings, like one-on-one engagements that happened, were quite massive. Also connecting with the PIC, our own PIC, which is the 7th largest sovereign wealth fund in the globe. And we could put the two together, and they were able to talk about the collaboration that they'd be doing, looking at best practices and what is it that they can do to strengthen the ties as they focus in investing in Africa.
Now, on that note, I'd be quite curious to understand which sectors were the most interesting. Where did you see the most appetite coming from the UAE towards African entities?
Sure, Tanya. Dubai, it's mostly known for oil. I think 85% was purely, like on the oil industry or sector itself. But very much aligned to what we're doing. You've got like the energy that is quite topical, and it's not just a Dubai or Africa, or it's an issue across the globe. You see what is happening currently with gas, and in the Europe region, you can see what's happening currently on energy. Just talking about energy, like we've got COP27, we're touching on that briefly to say how do we transition, to cleaner energy. So energy is quite topical. Water. It's a big theme. We had the likes of Emirate, and we had TCTA that was that had joined us on on the summit, and like the water boards, obviously. And you've got healthcare that is quite big. You've got infrastructure that is quite massive, hospitality, and I mean, the list is endless, and also the real estate sector itself. And you can see that the UAE is very, very progressive. And if you look at their infrastructure as well, and the connecting points, and yeah, but it's quite a buzz, I must say, and very, very exciting time.
I'm sure. But I mean, we have had quite a tumultuous last 2 years. I mean, going from the COVID-19 pandemic, the war with Russia and Ukraine, now going into a high multi-year inflation environment in many countries across the globe. Have you seen any shifts in terms of investor appetite for our markets?
Actually, not at all. You know, we actually have an opportunity to just roll up, you know, like it should be an uptick for us. Africa is, it's blessed, you know. I think we are blessed to have ports like the ports that we've got. I mean, I think about our Durban port and its berth, and the kind of vessels that the Durban port can actually hold. Just thinking across the continent itself, even with everything that is happening, still remains the third largest port, you know, following the Moroccos. And look, the opportunities that Africa presents, you know, like in terms of the infrastructure that still needs to be developed across the various regions. So if you look at South Africa, we always say Africa, it's like a London without all the resources of a London, because you're not a first world. But you look at our infrastructure and how we are positioned, we're still a good country. But other countries in the continent, they require all those investments, and the appetite for Africa is there. We have seen that, and we've seen that even from the Dubai side. You know, they actually committing some exports to Africa, and they are doing like various exports to the likes of the Zimbabwe itself. But whilst traditionally they had been focusing on East Africa, you know, the trade itself, that is due to the historical like that has been there. And now the UAE, like if you look at their trades themselves, they are actually significantly diversifying the geographies, not only focusing now on the East Africa, they're looking at West Africa. There's also work that is being done in the West Africa itself. North Africa is already covered, you know, by our presence there. We're seeing the Francophone being covered. We're seeing East Africa, obviously it's been there, like Southern Central itself. And look, it's everything is just on a upward tick because of the excitement. It's almost like we've found this. Africa has the potential. I mean, if you look at the geographies, you look at the population and the opportunities that the continent presents, there is no holdback, and there's an uptick on the appetite for African investment. Where else would you go? I mean, think about all the continents. I mean, Africa is where do you go? Yeah.
But I mean, historically, it hasn't always been the case. There was quite a few stumbling blocks, or let's say hindrances, that were stopping investors from looking at the continent. Do you get a sense that some of these are still at play right now?
It's not as heightened, and you're quite right. I think previously we needed to find ourselves as Africa as well. You know, if you look at some of the regions, and I'd like to reflect on Rwanda, for instance. You know, if you look at Rwanda today and what Rwanda was 10 years ago, if you look at Nigeria itself, you know, if you look at Ethiopia, where Ethiopia is today, you know, you're seeing Ethiopia like actually standing out quite aggressively, you know, like on the energy side itself, and they're trying to open up, you know, for more businesses to come in. And then you look at the likes of your Kenya, you look at the likes of your Uganda, look at your Angola. Things have moved, you know, things have moved. And yes, the stability and instability is not just for Africa. We actually realize that now, that instability does not necessarily translate to this particular continent, you know, and things get quite heightened. You look at the geopolitics now. I always say to the team, you get quite restless, you know, about the geopolitics, you know, like the heightened tensions, China, US, Taiwan, and obviously the Ukraine, Russia. But that's still, I mean, we still stand, you know, and with the business center where you can do so much. So yes, it has changed. Like you can see, like the momentum is moving completely, and all the GMNCs, like your global multinational companies, have a huge interest in Africa, and we do have those conversations with the GMNCs.
Well, that's the news that we like to hear. Now let's talk about the other direction, African organizations entering into the UAE market. What have you seen to be one of the biggest advantages or interest coming from African organizations?
Yeah, I think the ease of doing business in UAE, I mean the tax. I mean, it's easy, and Dubai has got free trade zones, which means that you can go, you register, you operate. The repatriation of funds makes it quite easy as well. So yes, I mean, it depends where you want to be, and it's a matter of awareness, you know. And I remember I was talking to one of the clients when we were going to do that conference, and then I said that we'd like to create this bridge and do like this collaboration between the SA Inc. and UAE. You have presence in the UAE? I'm like, yes, we do have presence in Dubai. Like, but we've been looking at this market for the listed portfolio and for the unlisted portfolio rather, and then we need to have the conversations with the right investors there. And that alone told me that we still need to be doing more engagements. We need to be announcing that, look guys, UAE is open for business. You know, I think the president had that summit earlier on in the year, and that is just really creating awareness, and to say that we shouldn't just be focusing on Europe or the UK or the US or Asia, and we've got pools, you know, of markets that we need to be tapping into, and they are hungry for our business. And yes, some SMEs, I've met some SMEs that have actually set up there, and they're quite excited. They're looking at setting up in the real estate particularly, and they're looking at setting up like in the e-commerce sector, because technology is quite big in UAE. So yes, so there is appetite. It's just to create more awareness and to our SMEs, and the fact that these are the benefits that they'd be getting.
But when it comes to the public sector, what sort of deals are you seeing coming through between the UAE and Sub-Saharan Africa?
So we have not had the opportunity to conclude on deals, and for us, because I'm a bank, whatever work happens that is not out in the public domain, I would not be in a position to talk about. But there is so much that is brewing. Watch the space.
Okay, we most definitely will do. We most definitely will do. So then we'll speak to the future. Where do you anticipate the markets to go, or the relationships to go, in terms of the UAE and African markets?
Oh, it's just gonna be like a marriage, you know, and because this is a market that we haven't even touched the surface. So we'll be going there. It's just going to grow from strength to strength, and there are various opportunities, like I said, across the various sectors. And if you talk about water is a topical subject for us when you talk about the water sector itself. And but you also touched on energy and how topical energy is, and also we're talking about the food, you know, like security itself. Like that is agri. If you talk about food, water, and energy, I think you can survive. You know, so these are some of the sectors that are set to grow, and obviously logistics. You know, like you talk about the transportation itself. UAE boasts some of the big operators, you know, like in the logistics space. Absolutely. And they're doing work. They've looked at Africa. They love Africa. We've seen some of the likes of UDP Worlds actually entering like your Angola itself, and they're quite interested in the regions, the various regions in Africa. So this is just the beginning. Africa, your time is now. You know, things will be happening going forward, and we just have to look at specific transactions or specific sectors that you know that we can do much on and that are critical for the economies, not just our economy, but you know, like Africa will thrive if all the regions are actually doing well. Yeah. So we do have like your cross-border amongst ourselves. We talk to Mos, we talk to Kenya because we like an African bank because of what we do. We driving Africa's growth. So partnering with the likes of your UAEs, it's quite important for us, and that's exactly what we do.
Brilliant, and I couldn't agree more. But when we speak UAE also, and particularly Dubai, very often we hear of technology, innovation, and how this is a city that is living in the future. And I mean, I was there recently and just heard of the project for the One Line, the 1 kilometer, may even be more, housing project. Do you see this is an area of interest for African organizations in terms of learnings, in terms of knowledge sharing, and gaining more insights and being able to advance from an innovation and technological perspective?
Absolutely, Tanya, that's correct. You know, some of the things that we're looking at is the skills imparting, and that's really talking the collaboration that I touched on. And when we were there, you know, we were introduced to this museum, and we understand that technology is quite big. But for us, digitization as well, I was joking to say, just to sign on to come into your studio, you know, it's just electronic, you know, it's like new age. But the most exciting thing, obviously, for us is the fact that when you do that collaboration, there's it's a concerted effort to make sure that we grow, you know, our economy and using the technologies, and through those collaborations, definitely it's learning, you know, like so it's best practices. And we would leverage Dubai particularly, and it's something that is ongoing.
And what could be seen the other way around that African nations, organizations would be able to bring in terms of knowledge sharing to Dubai, to the UAE?
So the UAE, I don't think they, because of the oil and from the desert, and you know, like Africa, we've done well, quite exceptionally well, and I'll talk about South Africa particularly. You know, like we ran the first renewable energy program with the first. South Africa was the first. It is almost like a prototype, the RIP, you know, project, and this is used obviously as a prototype, and these are some of the things that we can share with them. And also, you know, if you think about your TCTA, this is the Trans-Caledon. These are the guys that are responsible for bulk water infrastructure and doing the dams, and how they make sure that there is water security. And some of the work that they do, we do a great job, you know, in making sure that there is water, and including our water boards, and just moving water around, getting water from Lesotho and bringing it to South Africa. And some of the work that the guys do, like they boast, we've got great engineers that do great, particularly in that space. And that's why Medido had such a huge interest, you know, in talking to the likes of your TCTAs and the likes of your DBSAs, because they're quite big on water itself. And yes, these are some of the things that we can take to the UAE. And not just that, I mean, the agri as well. We're quite big on agri as a continent and South Africa. So it's agri that we can talk about, you know, like our farmers and what we do. I think there's best practices. Those are the learnings. So there's specific sectors that I think we do exceptionally well on, and it's really doing like those best practices as they bring the technology. And we do have technology savvy people as well. And for us, it's just to make sure that this is how we collaborate, and these are the things that we'd be taking to the UAE.
And what about public-private partnerships? What is the interest there, and have you seen anything that you could share with us?
Not for, we're actually in the process of finalizing some of those PPPs, and I think for South Africa we also do private sector participation. I think the buzzword is also PPPs are there, but the buzzword is also private sector participation onto the government itself. Yes, there's been like huge interest, you know, and I think in 2023, 2024, you will see what I was talking about, you know, like actually materializing because of the participation and the interest that has been demonstrated by the UAE in getting involved. In fact, they have been wanting to get involved as far back as 2014 when we had some conversations with them and looking at how best they can participate in the economy itself.
Now, listening to you, I really get a sense that there's a strong appetite for what we have to offer as a nation, as a continent, and that there's also opportunities that side for organizations, for state-owned entities, for the public sector. The one thing that I'd love to get your insights on, and I'm squeezing a last question because we're almost running out of time, is in terms of skills. I mean, we have a thriving demographics. The demographics are on our side. We have youth. We have... Yeah, so how are you looking at that in terms of what the UAE offers and in terms of what Sub-Saharan Africa offers?
Yeah, I think if you look at our continent, we boast, like you just said it yourself, the demographics and the population itself. We are growing, as opposed to some of the countries or the other continents, but we can speak about to Africa and what it has to offer. The youth, if you look at AfCFTA, there is youth, there's programs that they're looking at for the youth, there's programs that they're looking at for women, and that is quite massive, you know, and because that opens up so much, you know, and I'd like to reflect on what this stands for us, you know, that free trade agreement, once everything is finalized, the FDI, you know, like the FDI that will be flowing into the continent. I think the projections, as per the report, the World Bank report, says between a whopping 111 and 159%, which is quite, it is quite amazing. And then you talk about the e-commerce. So I think that we have a lot to offer, and there will be more participation as we open up. And you touched on the pandemic itself. I think 2020 and 2021 kind of like pulled things back. If we did not have the pandemic, I mean, finalizing in 2019, we'd be looking at what has been implemented and what have we realized and what are other targets that we're pushing for.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Zen. I absolutely loved our conversation and gaining insights from you and understanding a little bit more about the work that you do, but also the opportunities that exist for our nation. So thank you for joining us today. That brings us to the end of this episode of CNBC Africa in Conversation with myself, Tanya Habimana. I was joined by Zen Dlamini, Executive Head, Sovereign and Public Sector, Corporate and Investment Banking at Standard Bank. Until next time, thank you for watching.